Welcome to the Lovecraft Country Discussion Group podcast. We're discussing episode 8, Jiggabobo. We have your illustrious host, Taylor Mate, moderators and contributors, China, Yeli, Pamela Wood, and our newest member, Micah. I am Justin Davis. Please enjoy the show.
Okay. This episode was excellent. This was everything that we wanted. This was everything that we needed. It hurt, but we loved it. So we are going to get into, we're just going to get into the biggest thing that everyone could not ignore, and that was these Topsy-turvy twins. They were terrifying. They scared me, and I'm not a jump scares person, okay? That's not me, but they got me every single time. Thoughts? What are your thoughts on the Topsy-turvy people?
Oh my goodness. The fear that went through America over these two, some folks call them demon dolls, some called them just crazy names, but we know that they are in the show called Topsy and Bopsy. They are riffs off of the Topsy-turvy dolls that were made long before, I think before the Civil War. And Yelly, you can say maybe more some specifics about it. But long story short, you had one that was dark skin on one side, you flip the skirts, and you would see the lighter skinned doll on the other side. These dolls proliferated for years and years. They're still being made in the Caribbean, but they are of a different sort, meaning they're just two black dolls, no definition of color. But anyway, so these crazy little demons begin to follow our heroine after the spell is put on them. But they are a part of Black minstrel shows, and this has been pervasive since forever, and formed some of the strongest caricatures of Black folks that could have been made from that time till now. So of course they have, this crazy hair with skewed ribbons tied all over, sackcloths. I think if we look close enough, we'd probably be able to tell the name of the flour sacks that they were wearing. Not unusual for slave children during those times. And so it's just a riff off of that, except of course, this perspective of how they turned out is probably something from the white gaze that is beyond anything that anyone could have ever imagined. And so seeing them bop day and night following our heroine was truly terrifying for a lot of us, as we saw. They are also accompanied by a tune that is equally haunting and creepy, which is, it's Stop That, it's DAT, Stop That Knocking, because of course, all people of color or Black people during that time could not say the word that. I'm being facetious. So this tune was written in 1847. And so it was called Stop That Knocking. There's a current riff of it from the 1980s that was redone. I don't know why anybody would redo Black minstrel songs, but it exists. And this is the tune that is actually in the show. And it was done in the 80s. And they, of course, I said they Lawrence Welk it by making it Stop That Knocking. You must stop that knocking. And so, of course, we have wonderful music curators for the show who just created such a creepiness to it that I don't think anybody would like to hear that come on the radio anytime soon. Not anybody Black, at least. That was very haunting and scary. So, anybody?
I'm with you. I don't scare easily. I am a twin. Like I have my own Bopsy to my Topsy. But look, I was like, I don't even know if my sister and I could take those two because they were extra. That was a lot. I just want to just big up the dancers. The choreography was amazing. A blend of kind of classical blackface minstrelsy, the kind of buck dancing, and then also kind of modern dance moves. You find a lot of like hip hop dancing. And so I thought that was pretty interesting, the mashup of those things. Now, a little bit of background on the Topsy-turvy dolls. They've taken a lot of different forms, right? Sometimes you'll have a white and a black doll. Sometimes, as Pamela said, you'll have two black dolls with two skin tones. Sometimes you'll just have two black dolls. One is dressed nicer and the other one is dressed with poor, you know, more simpler fabric. After Uncle Tom's Cabin comes out and this character in the novel Topsy becomes popular, then a lot of the dolls begin to kind of take the form of Topsy. But before that, this doll was really a doll that was created by enslaved women for Black children to play with. And it was a form of subversion. It was a form of kind of building self-esteem for children. So I worked at the FAMU Black Archives and Museum, and the curator there was like super into dolls, and she had a couple in the collection. And she was talking to me about how people really don't know how enslaved women would make these dolls to build up the self-esteem of the little children. The tattered, plain-looking doll was the one that they played with openly. That's what the slaves' lot was. But the one that had the finery on, they would play with in secret. You know, the mothers were still trying to teach the children that you are valuable, you have worth, and you're worthy of the finery. You're worthy of a better life, but this is what I can offer you. So I think that's really important because looking at Topsy and Bopsy and the fact that this is the terror, this is the entity that is meant to terrorize Dee is so apropos because she's this confident, intelligent, you know, self-assured Black girl who somehow was raised free. You know what I mean? Like she wasn't raised to shrink the way that even her mother was. And so the direct antithesis to Dee's character is this stereotypical kind of inhuman Black girl creature. And it's almost like throughout the episode, you see these various kind of stock characters from blackface chasing and kind of haunting our main characters. So it's not just Topsy who's haunting Dee, and quite literally before, when they're even casting the spell on Dee, when the cops have her in the alley, you see this whole thing is being presided over by Uncle Ben, and he's kind of like, he's watching this go on. And then the specter of the Mammy haunts Ruby when she's walking to William's house in this neighborhood where she now lives with him, and the white guy accosts her in the street and asks her if she's the maid. So you have kind of all of our characters to varying degrees being haunted by the spirit of blackface. And to me, I think what I took away from that is like, under the white gaze, under these characters that are kind of part of the white imagining of Black people, these grotesque stereotypes, Black folks are always kind of offered that. Like, it's always chasing us down. There's always the choice to sell out. There's always the choice to like buck dance and coon and shuck and jive to get ahead. It's always on the table for us. And we run away from that. We shrink and we hide, trying to maintain a sense of dignity and selfhood. But it's always there looming. Do I sell out? You know what I mean? Do I just do a little bit of shucking for this job or for this position or for this opportunity? And I think that there's that. And Dee is completely anti all of that. In fact, she's more afraid of the silencing kind of Black girl box of Topsy than she is of the cops. She goes into the lair of Lancaster and cusses and yells at white male cops. Like, that's a Black girl I don't think many of us can imagine today. And this is 1955. And I think that that's really important because Dee is kind of, we have to kind of really think about Dee being kind of the extreme end of like kind of a Black girl that we all wish we could be. And how even though she's been raised in a supportive family that allows her to be this way, the society and the outside world is still threatening to kind of like pull her into that box. So yeah, there's that.
And Pam, didn't you have a note about addressing the end when one of the Topsy twins was tearing off Dee's arm?
Oh, yes. So people questioned why, well, some people thought both of the twins were attacking her. The reality is only the first one who got there, which would happen to be the lighter skinned one, started actually attacking her. And you see the dark skinned one kind of get very sad, and she kind of squats down. She's angry because she didn't get there first. And the thing is with the doll, you really can only play with one side. And so the thought process is, in the land of toys, the saddest thing is a child that doesn't want to play with you as a toy. And so they depict that, which is so interesting, that she just like collapses. She's upset, you know? And so I think it's very interesting how they did the direction first of how the doll appears coming up the subway. You have one stepping backwards because technically she's under the skirt and quote unquote probably can't be seen. And then all of a sudden the dark skinned one pops out to say, ha, you know? So I think they tried to portray the doll in its physical form if it actually came to life in such magnificent ways, though. I know it was scary, but
even after the darker doll pops out the side, the other one, the first time you see her face, she's upside down. She literally backwards. As a child would do with a doll. Exactly, because you can only play with one at a time. And so the other one's upside down while you're playing with the other one. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and I think all of their dance movements were really like about these weird inverted angles that I thought were really creepy, one, but also just brilliant. And I wanted to mention the fact that I think of these dolls as interrupters. Like, or do we think of it as one doll? I don't know, but the doll is an interrupter, because we keep having this conversation about who are you uninterrupted. Yeah. Dee is already uninterrupted, right? And I feel like this doll and these blackface characters are interrupters. Like at every turn, they're popping up, kind of thwarting her plans to find safeness and safe space for herself to just feel her feelings. So.
And there was also the idea that the little girls that Dee threw rocks with represented these Topsy-turvy twins. And in that scene, when Dee's throwing the rocks, we still have that one's facing her, one has their back to her.
True. Maybe the haunting started even before the spell was cast.
Continuity.
Yeah.
I also noticed one of the girls that Dee throws rocks at turns around and waves. And then when we first see Topsy and Bobsy, one peeks around and waves too. So it's definitely that kind of dual thing going on.
Yeah, I think there's something there. So continuing. Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I was gonna say the girls that were playing jump rope. That was a nod to the Freddy Krueger movies, because they always started with that part where you would see the girls playing jump rope in slow motion in the Freddy Krueger movies, doing the nursery rhyme, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. I know the whole thing by heart for some strange reason.
Oh.
I do too. That's crazy. Yeah, and I think you're right.
Yeah. I would creep out my son with it.
White Girls Jumping Rope is like a portal to like all of the calamity and terror that will come after.
Well, they're on the same street, which is funny. They're on opposite sides of the street, just like, you know, in real life. You know, these girls are having a normal day. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Everybody who's Black on the other side of the street is distressed. Letty is on her way to whatever. And Diana's just like frantic. And they're just playing, going on about their lives as they normally would.
Is this our Whitey on the Moon theme coming through again?
Scott Heron. Yep.
Okay. Okay.
2 different realities.
Yep. Exactly.
So continuing on our reference train, we have the color purple.
Yes. So if everybody takes a look at, if we were to put side by side the picture of Diana and the character of Nettie in the color purple, as Nettie is being kicked out of the house by Mr., you would see they have the same hairstyle, I should say. They have the same basic dress on, and they are in distress. From that scene, you know that Nettie, well, you know, prior to that, Nettie's the intelligent one. She's gotten the education, but she cannot stay in that place because she is interfering what Mr. wants to have happen, meaning either you're going to be with me or you're going to have to get out. And she could have been the siren there, because she screams, Nettie screams as rocks are being thrown at her. Here are rocks again in Lovecraft. Our girl Diana has picked up rocks to throw at the other girls. All this stuff keeps coming up over and over again about how similar these two characters were distressed. Mr. sends away Nettie to go, she ends up on a worldwide journey to bring back her family. And so I thought to myself, is this foreshadowing that our Diana will eventually have an opportunity to travel, to come back and bring her family back together? I don't know.
She might travel through time. I remember someone having a theory that she is the woman with the robotic arm in the future that Tick runs into with the hood on and the robotic arm. So like, I mean, as we see at the end of the episode, her arm gets ripped up. So perhaps that's why she has a robotic arm at some point in the future. So maybe she is a traveling woman like Nettie.
Perhaps so.
So we have Nettie, and then we have all the uncles.
Oh, yes.
All the uncles from Ben to Tom.
We've got Uncle Ben, Uncle Tom. We've got Rastus, who is on the box of cream of wheat. All three characters have been portrayed as, what do we want to say, Cooney? Although there is a bit of a difference with Uncle Tom. People feel that another way about Uncle Tomming, but the reality is that these three have been portrayed as, you know, not the best stereotypes for Black men. And in contrast, you have Uncle Daddy, right? And you have Uncle George. Completely different uncles from what the white perspective has kind of tried to taught us to believe that Black men are. We're talking about whatever. But the reality is these are uncles Dee would never really think would come into the realm of her existence other than on a box or in a book, you know? And this is probably her worst nightmare. Her absolute worst nightmare. You know, every episode we've said, who are the white monsters? There's white monsters everywhere. But for her, they're Black monsters. So I think this is just like mind-blowing that they could turn it around that way, that the very thing you would think would be of comfort, the term uncle, doesn't work that way for her.
I think that's really interesting. Like, now that I think about the point you just made, it's Dee has lived in a pretty well-protected Black world in Black Chicago. Segregation is not always a bad thing. Like, she found safety there. She had two parents, a loving household, you know, she could draw and think and imagine. And for some Black folks, I think that is the scarier thing. Like, Dee wasn't afraid of white folks at all. It was, you know, some people are like, our worst enemy is ourselves, you know, as products of this tortured white imagination. Like, a coon in Black folk, a sellout Black folk is worse than a white folk. You know, like, some people really are of that mind. So maybe that's why Dee is, like you said, kind of uniquely afraid of these Black characters as opposed to the white one.
It's her worst nightmare. And considering that they are demons, this child realizes towards the end, of course, that if you don't confront your demons, she sets them up to come into the garage. In life, if you don't confront your demons, you are faced to see them every day, no matter what. She had decided, you know, in her mind. On top of that, she goes to see the cops, as you mentioned, Yali, and you got a Black girl facing a white man. But guess what? The white man understood that she had enough bravado. He didn't talk to her like, you know, I'm gonna kill you now, you know? He really had a conversation with someone he felt was on his level. And if you've ever been a Black woman in a white corporate world, it's usually the white male and the Black woman who seem to keep rising up. And they're always either teamed up as one who's had to do that, who's teamed up with a white male superior, you know? This is not an unusual relationship or something that's unusual to be seen. I just found it very like, oh, that's like going to work. I got to talk to this man about some stuff. I got to ask him. He didn't tell me everything I needed to know. She went in there with purpose and didn't think twice about it because she felt, I'm your equal.
Mhm.
Amazing.
Kind of
And it
child I'm
goes
trying
back
raise.
to okay. And it goes back to, you know, how fiercely Dee feels about her mom. And so when I saw Uncle Tom's Cabin, it made me think of A Key to Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was sort of the sequel written afterwards, because the author, Harriet Beecher Stowe, was started getting all of these negative reviews, a lot of positive too, but a lot of negative reviews for misinterpreting, you know, or misrepresenting slavery. And so The Key to Uncle Tom's Cabin was written, you know, kind of given what we call the receipts. Like, here's all the documents, here's all the facts. Y'all not about to, you know, take something that I put out and try and flip it into something it's not. So, you know, we have this key coming back into play, which the keys have always been, you know, mentioned throughout the series so far. And so Dee, in a sense, is a key to changing a perspective, I think. You know, she has the ability to change her own reality as she sees it for herself, and very much portrays this through her art. You know, changing her mom's image to Erythia Blue because she sees the strength in her mom that she doesn't even see. You know, using her art to sort of, I thought in the garage, kind of conjure Topsy and Bopsy, you know, drawing them out and luring them into, you know, her space to play on her terms. You know, so I feel like she is, in a sense, her own key. Everybody's been looking for the key to this, the key to that, something open. And she very much is secure in the fact that, no, I'm my own key. Like, I'm taking things into my own hands to free myself. And I very much rather do that than to have this white man have, you know, something over me, some type of power over me, and find him this orrery that I'm not even in this in any type of way. I don't know what you're talking about, why you need it. And so I love that that's the decision she makes. She's like, you know what? Forget you and your orrery and this stinky ass office. Okay? I'm going to go fight whatever you put on me and free myself. Like, forget that. So it's very much in her character to do so. And I just love it. Montrose kind of threw me off because he don't know how to fight his own demons. So that just threw a wrench in that whole thing. But I'm very interested to see, you know, what's going to happen with that and how that's going to play out.
Yes. 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 And she set the tone for that, letting Montrose know what he wasn't going to do. Because after she said, "Where's my mother?" and she said, "I'm tired of y'all lying to me," I knew then. You know how you have a moment in each one of these episodes where you just know? That's when I knew about it.
And it goes back to, you know, this question of, I've seen it post in the group, is Dee clairvoyant? How does she know certain things? Or she just has a feeling. And a lot of us, you know, have that intuition and we don't always follow it. We have that gut feeling. Pam can speak to this with all knowing, because your intuition is just there naturally. But, you know, like, where does she even know where Lancaster is? That's a secret room inside of a lodge, you know? So it's just certain things pop up when she tells her mom, I don't think we're supposed to be here. Like, we doing something crazy, you know? So I don't know. Well, I hope that they expand on, you know, Dee. They have to touch on it again because Dee deserves it.
Dee does deserve it. So what she didn't deserve, though, was everything she was dealing with at this funeral. And going to kind of circle back to the funeral, because outside we have the Nation of Islam and we have Black politics happening outside of this, a Black political sphere happening outside of a very controversial and very high profile and unfortunate event. So Ellie, what are your thoughts on this, what we're seeing here?
This is a really interesting time. So the death of Emmett Till, the killing of Emmett Till, and I like that Letty was very specifically telling Tick, it's not a death. He didn't just passively die. Someone did this to him. I'd be telling my students that all the time. It's actively killing someone. But this is a moment in which Black political genealogies are taking some interesting shapes. And so we actually see kind of like a representation of a couple of these strands in this moment where everyone's outside by the hundreds waiting in line to go view his body. We see the woman come out and vomit after viewing his body. The first woman we see who speaks is this Black woman who she prays, to herself. She says, all we can do is pray for the Lord to protect us from this evil. And then immediately that's contrasted with the fiery talk of those Nation of Islam brothers. They're standing up on this soapbox, they got their kufis on, and they're shouting, my brothers and sisters, I say no more. And then you get kind of like a call and response because the crowd says, no more, and that becomes a chant in the rest of the scene. And then compared to that, you have the Black minister who's speaking to the white press, and they're interviewing him, and he's kind of much more calmly saying we need to be organized and we need to, use the law. And so you really see kind of, again, that Black person who's not going to be out in the streets trying to organize, but they will stay home and stay in prayer. There's still some of us who just stay in prayer, you know what I mean? And pray for Jesus to come and help us with our race problems. You see the Nation of Islam is an organization that really rises to prominence and rises in popularity during the 50s. And Emmett Till's death definitely has something to do with that. So the Nation of Islam is a grassroots organization. They organize in the prisons. They organize on the streets, on the street corners. They're trying to recruit the everyday Black person. There's not this kind of elitist kind of approach. And then the minister really is symbolic of kind of this kind of more mainstream Black civil rights pathway that you see, where it really is much more about integration. It is about appealing to the morality and the sympathies of white America, as opposed to speaking inwardly to each other, right? The Nation of Islam is speaking to the people are speaking back, the minister's speaking to the white press, he's not speaking to the people. So I think it might be a critique maybe of that, although we know that the civil rights movement definitely involved Black women prayers, and some of us are still here and surviving on our foremothers' prayers. Civil rights movement definitely had some valuable work being done and some grassroots work being done, and the Nation of Islam is not without its issues, but it definitely spoke to a segment of our population. And after Emmett Till's death, this is when a whole new group of Black people who weren't even really thinking about political involvement and engagement get more directly involved. It inspires and lights up the whole country. And so we'll talk more about the influence of his death, I think, in some as the conversation progresses, but definitely an important moment.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I wanted to mention real quick, this is also the moment where you see kind of the early stages of a Black cultural revolution. Not only did the Nation of Islam bring forth this kind of like Eastern culture, this Near Eastern culture, this Asiatic Black man idea, but you also see, like, the cop even says when he asked Dee her mother's name and she says Hippolyta, he's like, oh, you with these African names. So this is actually the time and period in which Black people start really exploring African culture and like their origins. And some of us start giving our children African names and Islamic names. This is where all Jamals and Keishas and those kind of names do come from at this moment. We're just trying to find alternatives to the whiteness and the things that whiteness has done to us, the harms of whiteness.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so I'm trying to weave these all together. So from this scene, because there's some elements of this that kind of carry over, the idea of death and decay. So death, decay, hell on earth, all of that is starting to stew at this funeral. Thoughts on death and decay, because Dee makes a few sort of interesting comments, and she, I believe, is the only person that brings mention to what is that smell? Like, what is that smell? That's him, isn't it? Like, what is that smell? Like, your office stinks. Like, Dee, this death notion, even when she gets the spell put on her, and now she has flies buzzing around her head, there's maggots coming out of the ground, there's this death theme that's happening. Even when she runs off and the other cop was going to go after her, and Lancaster goes like, well, no, she's already dead. Don't forget about her. She's dead already. It's like, What's going on with death in this episode?
I would say the death is actually the stench. Let's be very clear. The stench of death that is so pervasive. So it is the summer of '55 in Chicago. The 1950s are noted as, on record still, as the worst heat waves to ever strike Chicago on record history. So having said that, and you see everybody is just sweating this entire episode and everybody's glistening because of the heat. You have the blackouts. There are rolling blackouts that happen during that time. You see where Montrose and Tick sit down on the sidewalk, and then at some point the lights across the grid just go off. So it is not unusual at that time. And you hear, if you really listen to the platform announcements of the subway, I'm sorry, in Chicago they call it the L, right?
No, it's the L.
I apologize, I'm from New York. And so on the L, you hear the announcement that because of the electricity and blackouts, well, we're going to have a problem. That's why everybody exits down through the station. And so, yeah, everything starts to decompose, literally. When they are casting that spell on her, maggots, you know that their type of magic is evil magic. If maggots have to come out in order to, make something happen for you, obviously that's not good. And so she's the only one who's able to recognize that, you know what, everything stinks. The way Bobo died, the way you all are standing around here, the way these cops are treating me and think they can get away with it, literally everything stinks. And so she makes commentary throughout the episode about it.
Okay. Let's connect these to the black shoggoth at the end. Thoughts on him?
Well, I had a connection. I thought throughout the episode you have this idea of like things being unearthed, almost as though the whole city, like you said, like death was like this pervasive thing. Death and rot and decay was like this pervasive thing. And so like things like the shoggoth, actually literally this black monstrous creature rises up out of the earth like an unburied thing, right? And I think there are so many other examples of that, but in my head, I'm thinking about the ways in which Black folks have historically thought about the lynching of Emmett Till as like this moment that we all died, like one of our children was killed. And so the city of Chicago dies a little bit, right? Particularly Black Chicago dies a little bit. So in addition to, the heat wave that Pamela just talked about, which sweeps the city and causes all the dead, rotting things to smell even worse than they did before, you have this whole landscape of death and darkness. And I even thought like maybe it's hell, like maybe Chicago is now hell. Like you have the rising up of the dead, the invoking of the dead. Even Topsy and Bopsy come up onto the L platform from like someplace below. Like you don't even, it's the street, but it's like they still kind of are emerging from the darkness, below, just like the shoggoth does. You have the reenactments of the killings of Black men. Like you have Dee who reenacts with the cops. They force her to this position of Eric Garner, and he's in the chokehold saying, "I can't breathe." You have Christina reenacting the killing of Emmett Till. So there's this invoking of the dead, like they're all being like invoked, awakened from the dead. And of course Emmett Till. You have the flies and the maggots. You have the prayer that the woman makes about saving them from evil right at the start of the episode that I just mentioned. You have the darkness that comes from the power outage. So the trains don't work, but also like the power is off through a major like section of the city. And I haven't looked into this, but it's probably the Black section of Chicago that's in this outage, right? Even when you see Letty listening to music as she's developing the photographs, it's Stormy Weather by Billie Holiday. And the first line of that song is, "Don't know why there's no sun up in the sky." So it's this darkness that's just covering Black Chicago, right? Also, there's candles. So everybody's got to have candles because, if you grew up like me and you had power outages for various reasons, you had to use candles to see around. So there's candles in the church, like a lot of candles in the church when Letty's praying in the church. There are candles in Montrose's house when he and Tick are gonna do the ritual. But even before the ritual candles, they got like can't see because the power's out candles, right? In the church, side note, I wondered if, as Letty sat there praying in the church with all those candles, like I saw a connection to the Camille and her candles in her boudoir. Like if those candles in the Kumiho's bedroom represented the souls of the men she killed, what if all those candles in the Black church that Letty's praying in represent the souls of the Black people who have been killed through, racial terror and violence? Like maybe that's what, maybe there's a parallel there some kind of way. But back to this notion of like darkness, I thought about DMX's album, It's Dark and Hell is Hot. So I'm thinking Chicago's dark and Chicago's hot. Also, I just found this out. This is definitely got to be a reference to this Twilight Zone episode. It came out in 1964. It's called I Am the Night, Color Me Black. That's the episode if you want to look it up. And in this episode, the sun would not rise in a town in which a man was unjustly executed for killing a racist in self-defense. So this white guy kills this racist white guy in self-defense, and the town is like bloodthirsty. They want this man to die. They want to kill him. And because they actually killed this man who was just fighting for his life against a bigot, the sun won't come out. So the whole town is shrouded in darkness. But by the end of the episode, you realize that the sun won't come out wherever hate lives. So they actually mention in this Twilight Zone episode that the sun will not shine on certain section of Chicago. That's one of the places. I think there's North Vietnam is mentioned, some other places in the world where, hateful things are happening in 1964, but the sun does not shine in a section of Chicago. So Rod Serling literally was inspired to write this episode based on the killing of Emmett Till. And it was so controversial, like the first version of this episode, that network executives and other people tried to essentially interfere and keep it from being aired. And so at the end of the day, they had him censor the episode and kind of pare it down to something palatable to present. But he was really trying to tackle this issue of racial violence and racial killing. Instead of having a Black man lynched, though, he had a white man who was essentially lynched by his own people. So that's definitely something I thought, like, this dark section of Chicago coming up again, like, and Rod Serling really picking up on this moment where Black folks are shrouded in darkness behind, the killing of this young man.
That's mind-blowing, Yoli. Like, that is...
Yeah, I just found that I was like, what? This is crazy. So that's definitely a nod to Rod Serling, which I thought was really appropriate.
Wow. Justin, you had something on the shoggoth? Shoggoth?
Yeah, there's just been some theories floating around in the group. They're wondering if it's Uncle Daddy George. Is it Dora? Is it Montrose? I'm leaning towards Montrose because when he did the spell, he claims to have dyslexia, but he looked suspicious as he said it. It seemed that he may have changed the words around, like we said before, that it came upon him. And so because his whole intent, which is what was mentioned before, a body, intent, and so forth, his intent is to protect Atticus. So by him being the shoggoth, and then there's also a question of the amount of time, because he was with D, and then all this happens, the melee at the house with the bullets flying. So there's questions whether that's the case, but time has never really been clear on the show when things happen. So it's still a possibility. There's all kinds of theories floating around, like when the shoggoth came out of the ground, is he Black because he came out of the ground and the asphalt is Black, the ground is Black, he just manifested? Or is it actually Montrose? Like I said, I'm still leaning towards Montrose because his whole thing is to protect Atticus at all costs. So there's been a lot of theories that have floated around. There's a long-running post about that.
I think it's important to note too, like this shoggoth is way bigger than the other ones. The skin is Black, which I thought was a direct contrast to Christina's shoggoths, who are, pale. They don't like light. This one jumps through some fire, so, and it's clearly not affected by light at all. So I don't know if it's because Tick, his blood is, you know, more powerful. And so when he conjured something, and you know what, technically Montrose was the one to conjure it. It was so it would make sense. It would be something that would give him the power to protect Tick, who is in the circle of protection. So it makes sense, but it is a lot more powerful than the ones we've seen.
It was a whole
This shoggoth not being afraid of the light shows that it's fighting on the side of the light versus the other ones that are fighting on the side of darkness.
That cower in darkness.
So carrying on this train of protection, let's talk about the mark of Cain. And understanding that it's a protection symbol, but the notion of invulnerability versus immortality in this mark of Cain that now pregnant Letty has, and it was given to her in a church. That whole thing.
Yeah, the mark of Cain, which is also found in the Bible. Cain slew Abel, and the punishment that was put upon Cain was that he was given a mark so that no man would slay him. And he was said to be a vagabond and a fugitive in the earth. And he was basically banished from Eden to the land of Nod, east of Eden. So that mark, the mark of Cain, is supposed to be protection. Why does Christina have this mark and the Great Whites have this mark? They clearly are, sons of Adam, but which side? The evil side, which would be Cain. So by them trying to get back to the Garden of Eden, maybe they're trying to change something and put it in a different order. There's that possibility. And this mark is a protection spell, and it was placed on Letty. And that's why we see later on that the bullets couldn't affect her. So volume.
Tay, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm always just talking. Let's discuss this idea. Why Christina would be able to just walk pell-mell into this church just fine, and she nearly broke her neck just trying to get into Letty's house. And let's I know that this is a fine line, because it could very easily be said this is like Jesus versus hoodoo, but we're not going there. We're not going to do it. But we're going to just try to explore what's going on here with the idea of the temple. Who's the temple? What's the church? Who's the church? Why would someone that is perceived as evil be able to just waltz right? I mean, granted, we are understanding that it has to do with intent, energy, intent. Generally the intent in walking into Letty's house has been to be about some nonsense. Now, Christina going into the church, we could argue that she was just there to have a little chat with Letty. She wasn't in there to really knock over anything. But we understand that Christina is not, you know what I mean? Like, she might not be who we think she is. What do we think about the fact that Christina was able to just walk into the church?
Well, let me say this. The church is a building. And yes, it should be kept sacred, like when Christ cast the people out of the temple who were not respecting its standing. But it's just a building. And the people have to be in the right order with God, okay? The building is just symbolic, where people gather. The temple is you. Know ye not that ye are the temple of God. So she could walk into the building, but can she just approach any person? She tried to get to Letty. Letty had protection as well. So each individual has their own protection. I mean, the more darkness you have in you, the more evil you do, the more vulnerable you are to these dark forces. But the more light you have in you, the more you'll be protected. So that's just the building. So people who are stressing over how she was able to walk into the building and so forth, no, it's the individuals that you encounter. It's not the building.
Hmm.
And don't we always say the doors of the church are now open?
Mm.
So the church is supposed to be open and inviting.
Mm.
So I absolutely believe what you're saying about it's just a building, but it also invites you in. And what you do with it with your time there is the makings of either good or bad. So
Right. Even a person like Christina can repent.
Yeah, hoodoo definitely does
Exactly.
not work like that. Maybe Christina could go in there and repent. I guess that's a part of the Christian belief that people can be redeemed.
Right. All sin can be forgiven except blasphemy against the Holy Spirit.
Right.
And it's debatable what the blasphemy against the Holy Spirit is.
Yeah.
No,
Right.
you know the truth and then you speak against it. So
What do they
Well,
say? The
it
biggest
seems
sinners are down in front. Wasn't she walking down front?
It was up there. It was definitely up there.
Pretty close.
Yes, she was.
it almost seems like spirituality and religion we know they're two different things. So if you remove the religion aspect from it, we're all dealing with some sort of spirituality on a certain level, some sort of magic. And so Letty's house being protected by a body, the goat, the energy of its blood, and the intention in the incantation that was spoken, that's all three things to, keep the balance of nature and still invoke some sort of protection on the house. So, I mean, when you walk into the church, you have to technically have those same three things to, make something happen. So that's how I took it was, it's all about the intention. It's about, words. We always say words are very powerful. And so I think, those three things need to definitely come into play. And Christina keeps giving these clues and these hints without actually saying something. So it's kind of frustrating because all throughout, whether she's Christina or William, has always been giving these hints. Like, even when she says she puts the spell on or the protection of invulnerability on Letty, and she says, I was the first to find out that it can also be used to heal somebody. What does that mean? How is Letty gonna be like, she's just like, okay, cool story. But, so like she's given some information, but in a sense, it's like, okay, what is this supposed to mean to me? Even back when she's talking to Tick and he tries to shoot her in the realtor's office, he's like, look, I didn't come here for a history lesson. What's the point here? What information are you giving it and why? And how is this going to help me, if it's going to help me at all? And so she keeps dropping these little bits of knowledge out of context and making people run around in circles and mull it over until it actually maybe means something.
I think she
And
likes
so I saw a theory. Say what?
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I saw a theory of like, maybe, in that vision that Gia has, where Tick is essentially losing his life force, his energy, maybe Letty can somehow figure out the invulnerability spell and use it to heal Tick, or, there could be something there, because Christina definitely heals from her injuries having that spell.
Yeah, I think Christina likes playing with people. Like, I think, the whole doll idea is really prominent here. Like, I think she sees these Black people as dolls, but they don't even know their own power. And that's, and that's what I was going to kind of say about hoodoo. Like, hoodoo don't function like the church in that, and really to the point about defining what magic is. It's using tools to direct energy toward a very specific purpose, period. It doesn't have to be all this other crazy stuff. It's really just that. And using knowledge, techniques to direct energy to a specific purpose. And so hoodoo is about specific. Hoodoo comes out of the Black experience, surviving slavery, colonization, putting together the most potent things that we got here from Africa and the things we learned from here to save our lives and keep us thriving and living and surviving. So hoodoo is about specific remedies and addressing specific problems, problem solving. The church is a generalized place. When you go to the church, you're just coming to the symbolic place. Whatever you bring to it is what you bring to it, good, bad, or ugly. And then there's Jesus in there somewhere, and you might come to try to find that connection. But hoodoo is like, okay, in this moment, there's this door. We got to keep crazy out of this door. You know, it's very immediate. So that's I think the why. It's not necessarily a question of like what's more powerful. Although I will say there is something that we really need to think about in terms of these Black characters scrambling around looking for white magic in this book and all the pages and everything, when their own magic is working for them. Like, and they don't seem to realize these drawings work for her. These strategies work for her. Putting on that baseball cap as a helmet work for her. Using the blood and the goat and the hoodoo ritual worked. It is still working, you know, and I feel like it's almost like a wild goose chase that's ultimately going to bring them back to themselves as people of African descent and their own cultural traditions.
Right.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because it makes me think of all the times I was dragged to church and I'm sitting in this holy building and I'm like, all right, when are we leaving? Did the choir just start another verse?
Mm-hmm.
Did they just stop the song and start it back up? Okay, like, you know, so just being in the building, it has to be the intention behind it. It has to be the prayers you say. And it reminds me of when Letty, the last time we saw her in a church, she was dead in the eyes. She was there searching, like you said, searching for some kind of something to mean something, some sort of purpose.
Yeah, and with the churches, you have a body, which is yourself. You have intent. You know, you're determined to go there. You're seeking. But what is your energy? Energy is also required. What is the individual person's energy? What are you bringing? Because there are a lot of people who are in the churches who are there for ulterior motives.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people get funny when it comes to money, when that plate goes around, or when you rise up to the top in an organization and things get skewed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
the belief systems and the intention and the energy, and
Mm-hmm.
hoodoo is all about making sure that energy is right, whether you're approaching the deity or the deities or not. Like, your energy has to be checked at the door. Everybody can't come in like the church, you know, so it is different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of imbalanced energy in the churches.
So let's jump a little. We're going to jump into this theme because as we're talking about, you know, the church and the idea of good and evil and light and darkness, this theme of duality is very prominent in this episode. And it's even involved with the idea of the autumnal equinox, which Tick calls Christina out on her way out of the mausoleum. Now, Eli, can you explain a little bit about what exactly, because the only thing that I personally understand about this equinox is just that it deals with polar opposites, like above on the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, and one's spring and one's fall. But that's about as much as I understand about this.
Yeah. So the in this particular part of the world, the year is divided into kind of 4 segments related to the kind of movement of the planet around the sun, right? So you've got the solstices, the winter solstice and the summer solstice. The winter solstice is the shortest day, the longest night of the year. The summer solstice is the longest day and the shortest night of the year. And then you have the equinoxes in between. So the fall equinox and the spring equinox are the days in which the night and day are equal in length. So after the fall equinox, what that means is the days start getting shorter and the darkness takes over, right? We're heading into wintertime. So the days get shorter, the nights get longer. So it's a moving toward the darkness of winter. So the equinox really does represent the duality, because it's like the last day of the year when night and day are going to be equal. So this is a time of year where people do lots of rituals related to the harvest, related to gratitude and giving thanks for that harvest. They think about transformation, right? We can see the environment changing. We can see the leaves start turning colors, and you know, our bodies start to slow down a little bit, you know, and so all of that really is happening here. So I think that this episode definitely does have an acknowledgement of kind of the light and the dark. Although in some ways I don't see the equinox as the day that things come into balance, which is why it's kind of like a perverted or like a weird look at it. Because on the equinox, when things are balanced, it's just for that day. But like Christina, if she's doing this ritual with Tick on the equinox, it's as if like that ritual really ushers us into the era of darkness, right? Because that's when the days start getting shorter, the nights get longer. So like, is it about Christina's immortality, or does that usher in something even more sinister, is my question. Because this whole episode, again, is cloaked in darkness, but you do have kind of these interesting contrasts with even the clothing in the episode. You know, Christina's wearing light clothes for most of the episode. You have Letty wearing this black and white, half black, half white outfit. You have Dee wearing a frilly white dress at a funeral, in which most people in the Western tradition wear black to a funeral, or dark colors. So I see this as a time in which you have all these rituals going on throughout the episode, but there's something like they're inverted rituals, right? A young girl in a white frilly dress might be celebrating like puberty rites, or, you know, her sweet 16, or, you know, any of these other kind of lighthearted rituals around femininity and girlhood and that transition into womanhood. That makes sense around this time of year. But instead, she's wearing a white dress, a white frilly dress, to a funeral and a ritual around death, which is so not right. And Montrose even mentions that this is a rite of passage for Negroes, child or not. He says that, right? So her fall equinox ritual is not about abundance and the harvest. It's about the cutting down of a child that she was friends with. And I thought this was also kind of like the death of her innocence, you know. So not only did Emmett Till die and was killed, but like this is the farewell to her childhood, and that's maybe why she's wearing this kind of ritualistic netty dress. So in African tradition, you wear white to all the rituals, you know, in some African traditions, like to funerals, to happy rituals, not so happy, pleasant rituals, because it's a color of reverence, purity. Also, in some circles, white is thought to deflect negative energy, but like, it's not working for her today, right? Because she is tormented by negative energy. She's got her helmet, she's got her stuff, you know, but she's still haunted. I mean, everything is kind of like off kilter. And again, going back to the topsy-turvy dolls, like everything's off kilter, everything's flip-flopping throughout the episode. But back to just the last point about the farewell to innocence ritual. I think there were so many components to this ritual. She was in ritual the whole episode, losing her innocence and being stripped of that. So it begins obviously with the funeral. She even smells the smell, right? The point that Pamela was making. But then you have her she goes to like the Five and Dime or like the ice cream shop, and she sees those two black girls enjoying ice cream while Emmett Till's dead. First of all, why is the shop even open? Because all the other shops are closed in observance of this community ritual of mourning for this child, but they're open. Maybe it's a white-owned shop and they didn't care. I don't know. But the girls come out eating ice cream, and again, she can't even relate anymore to such a childish, kind of joyful, recreational practice. She's just like, no. She throws rocks at these girls. It's almost like a death to her own childhood innocence, right? She cusses at grown-ups, which is completely out of pocket for well-trained black children. She cusses at Montrose. She cusses at grown man police officers. So I think this is an episode in which, unfortunately, her fall equinox ritual involves the loss of her childhood and her innocence, because she's being chased down by these terrors. just you know, and because she's a black child in America. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, let me see. I'm trying to think of any of our other themes that could connect to this. D in Lancaster, the flowers, pruning flowers.
Mm-hmm. So Dee busts in through Lancaster's office, you know, and demands to know, what have you done to me, right? You would think she was 40 years old and just, she is full-blown woman by now, by this point of the episode. But when she walks in, you see Lancaster's evil cohort sitting down, pruning and trimming roses in a vase. And if you look behind Dee, you'll see other vases full of flowers. There are flowers everywhere. And, you know, for centuries, flowers have been used to cover up the smell of decomposing bodies. That's why we have sprays at funerals. Of course, this is before the advent of embalming. And so, as you can see, Lancaster, of course, part of his body is decomposing. He's always rubbing the oils on his body to keep the skin supple. He's got a body decaying in the closet. And Dee, of course, is confronted with the decomposing body of her best friend, Bobo. If you have ever had the awful opportunity to smell a decomposing body, it is something that will sear your brain and you will never forget the scent and the smell of that. So when Yelly talks about the loss of innocence, my God, smelling that, it changes your life. Unfortunately, I have smelled it. And so I'm saying to myself, I can imagine, as someone who's like, is she 13 or 14 now? Having to actually have that imprinted on her brain. So by the time she gets to Lancaster's office, she recognizes that scent. Mm-hmm. She's not going to say what it is, but she recognizes it and it triggers her immediately. Oh, and by the way, it stinks in here, you know? Whereas when she learns that that's the smell of Bobo, it's just like overwhelming. But for them, get your act together. It stinks in here. So.
Yeah. Now, Pam, I'm also going to ask you to explain this one because I missed it. This gets so deep. This show, this rabbit hole, I feel like Alice down the rabbit hole at the beginning of every single episode. And I don't even climb out at the end. When Cinnamon comes on, I don't even get back and find my dog. Like, I'm so, please, the Knights of the Templar.
Okay. So we have a member, and hopefully she catches this, F. Angel Merritt, who showed her papa, who's 89 years old, all the episodes of Lovecraft. He immediately tells her, my God, there's so much Masonic stuff in here. Someone's given up the secrets. He said, but you know what? That Montrose is a secret Knights of the Templar. And so if you're familiar with the Knights of the Templar, they were a sect during the Crusades, you know, that were just guardians, basically. And they fought fiercely. They had their own code that you'd never back down from adversity or challenge. And you'll begin to see some of those things click through the episodes if you go back, and I know everybody goes back. Montrose has been giving oaths. He's been saying, I am sworn to protect what I need to protect. And for Montrose, I believe that is the book. But more importantly, it's to protect Tick from the knowledge of what's in the book of names. As a Knights of the Templar, that's really his only concern. So you'll see him doing all these adverse things to what the group wants, which is, you know, obtaining the book. And he believes, I believe, that they should be kept from the knowledge because it is too much. You'll notice he'll always inject that you're never going to beat them. But if you have to beat them or try and get into some confrontation with them, as he instructs Dee, you must never, ever make it easy for them. Because Montrose knows, as he said, he gives us a hint that he lost his best friend. And I'm assuming that's back in Tulsa. And so he can identify with her feelings. And as she is getting her armor on, he cannot see what is happening. And by the way, that bathroom door was not locked. So we have this civility of the 50s where you don't bust in on a woman who's in the bathroom getting herself together, whatever that may be. And so he knows to send her this message that I know you're going to have to fight. I've been there before. And like Yahima has said, they have a thirst that cannot be quenched. They will keep coming. They will keep coming. And he has figured out that so long as I am vowing myself to keep and protect my family and to keep them away from this knowledge, whatever it is, this is his holy grail as far as he's concerned. As a Knights of Templar, he would be all about the mission, not necessarily caring about what everybody else is trying to accomplish. If anything, he's about the safety of others around him. So having said that, he also talks about to tick on the sidewalk as the blackouts are happening. He said, you know, I married your mother because she was familiar. Our love was familial. And so the fact that he said that is the greatest kind of love or the best kind of love you can have, it's amazing that it begins to tie in that as something that is familial to you, something that is familiar to you, you want to protect that. And that's what the Knights of the Templar did. And so I'm going to swing in the Alice Walker novel, which is The Temple of My Familiar. Now, The Temple of My Familiar, basically theme-wise, deals with the challenges that people of color face throughout their entire lives creating their own identities. Not unusual to Lovecraft at all. So they slid that in, if you're willing to go that deep with me. And so the fact that Montrose also uses his dyslexia, and I think Justin pointed it out when they're doing the spell, I believe that he also did turn that spell around for himself because he checks tick. Do you feel anything? Do you feel anything? Now we know Montrose is good at lying. We know he felt something. He's quick to cover up because he is that good with what he's been doing to protect. And so I believe he switched the spell on them. He became the Black Shoggoth, and I don't care that you see him in the garage with D, because as Justin said, time means nothing in Lovecraft country. You could be in two places at one time. We know that he's been known to dig himself out of the ground. You remember that scene where he comes out, which is why he loves the Count of Monte Cristo. That's his thing. The fact that he's dyslexic means he's been working mighty hard for many decades to beat it, overcome it in some way, which means he has learned how to memorize whole volumes. That's why he's comfortable with burning stuff up. I don't need it. Books are simply something for him to put in his filofax in his mind. And so I believe that when we see that shoggoth come up, that becomes Tick's familiar. And we know a familiar is a spirit or creature or an animal that protects. And so, boom, work on that theory, see what you find.
I think they're gonna like that one because there were a lot of people that thought that that was the shoggoth, but couldn't really connect it like that. I like the connection.
I tried.
I also noticed how Montrose, he read a certain sentence. We could see he was dyslexic. It's rubbing off. And then he proceeds to read or speak the language of Adam with no problem at all. Mm-hmm. So when Tick's like, there better not be no other secrets popping up, and Roncho's like, it's definitely some secrets.
It's some more secrets.
He definitely has some more secrets. And I think it has to do with more magic for sure.
Now, there were some people that were thinking that the shoggoth was Christina, but Christina was busy reenacting she paid for the reenactment of the gruesome murder of Emmett Till and broke the internet because from what I've been reading, there were mixed reviews. There were some people that really believed that it sort of disrespected the story and the history of what happened to have this reenacted on a white woman. But I kind of saw it the other way, as not really a retribution, because there is no retribution, but the idea of, like this, the rest of this series, flipping the story on its head and having the event carried out on the person that started it, which was a white woman. What do we think about what was happening with performative allyship, Christina, and what she thought she was doing, what she ended up doing, and if she got her point across?
You know what? I think we all see this in our lives at some point, where, and you use the great phrase, performative allyship. There are white folks that you have had to either work with, come in contact with, who will say to you, what do I need to do to understand what's happening? What do I need to do? And so they take it to heart and they do their best that they can. I think that's what Christina was trying to take the elements of everything she knew about the case and go through it. But here's the problem. It's performative if you know you're going to come out on the other side, just like a newborn babe. You know, the fact that she has laughter after being beaten, shot twice, tied and cut with her throat with the, it wasn't chicken wire, it was what?
Barbed wire.
Barbed wire, right. The fact that she comes up and can breathe, how about that? She can breathe and she's happy, she's elated, but has she learned? And so this is something that we see all the time, wherein people who are not of this experience of what it is to be in a Black body want to experience it. You can be, you know, everybody wants to be Black, but nobody wants to really be Black, you know? She's getting as close as she can to it. And I don't know, it's because she has some kind of feelings for Ruby, but to her, I think most of life is an experiment, an absolute experiment to try out. And I actually give kudos to Misha and those about using her so that we do not have to experience Emmett going through it. For what it's worth, I don't think she achieved anything other than a statistic of, okay, this is what happens with my body when these horrible things happen to me. And she's on to the next. She'll be on to the next thing because she knows she's got a plan. And she is moving these chess pieces around. This is just another part of the game. And so it's performative allyship. You know, Yelly talked about the pastor talking to a white audience on camera. And if you look to his right, there is a Rebbe or rabbi also there as a part of what I felt was probably a coalition to talk about Emmett's killing. And I thought to myself, is that performative also? It's allyship, but is that performative too? You know?
John Henry Clark would call that showbiz politics.
Right.
And, you know, we're engaged in a lot of that now. Maybe there's a critique there somewhere.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I would even take that a step further. I feel like Christina doing this reenactment of Emmett Till's lynching is peak white privilege. Because as you were saying, which is such an important point, like, she will never live in a Black body and have a Black experience. She can go through the motions and feel the physical pain, but she will never feel the existential terror of in this encounter may not come back. Right. I may not live out of this. I may die. Like, she knew going in, she would not die. And so that is the core part of the experience, the terror, the existential threat to your life that Black people encounter. Many of us feel that every day leaving our homes in this country and other countries in which we are colonized subjugated people. So, and I think that's, you know, I'm kind of trying to figure out, outside of just the ultimate white privilege to be able to pay to die, be killed on your own terms, to like experiment, like outside of that, is this about connecting with Ruby and trying to really connect with Ruby's rant and the ideas in that rant with Ruby? I don't don't know. I don't know what's going to be the outcome of this or what this is going to mean for Christina going forward. I'm less concerned. I'm less concerned with that, but I think there's interesting dynamics at work in their conversation that they had leading up to that. Like, I think once again, Christina has kind of advanced this kind of second wave white feminist, like, gender over race idea to Ruby. Let me just slide this your way one more time and see how you respond to it. Because, like, you know, she's done this a couple of times, right? And the first couple of times Ruby was like, F you, white woman, you will never know how I feel. And then now that they've got this intimate relationship, I feel like Christina kind of just put the feelers out there again. Like, are you open to this idea that it's not really about the race? And you really don't care as much as you think you do about being Black, but it's really about being oppressed as a woman and getting what you want as a woman. Maybe that's what it really is, Ruby. And I think Ruby this time is actually entertaining it. I think it gives Ruby some pause. You know what I mean? But so yeah, I don't know. I think Christina is still playing with her Black dolls. I don't know. I tend to not trust Christina at all. No matter whose church she walks into and what spells she's out here peddling, I don't trust it.
Mm-hmm. So I think we have some other notable points. We still have our siren. We still have D as our siren. And within that, I want to connect the idea of children being ignored and mental health issues and mental health in the Black community. Let's bake that cake. Like, what is going on with D and the adults? And because there were a couple of people in our group that didn't see D as this neglected, vulnerable child that the adults were casting aside. They saw this more as well, anyway, they didn't see it that way. But along those lines, the notion that she was being tormented, and this is a child that has, in a sense, a mental health thing going on, and people cannot connect to her and they cannot reach her. She's unreachable, even though she's standing right there. What do we think about this notion?
I would say that, you know, when we see people that are mentally ill, we tend to pat, push, meaning we pat them on the hand. Oh, I know some things are a little odd, and we nod and wink at other people, you know, they're a little off. I think when Montrose sees D out of sorts, I'm using a nice term, she's losing it, he sees someone who might be having a mental issue. And I think that's what we do all the time. We know, as the audience, there's some crazy chicks after this poor little girl. And we can see them, but obviously Montrose can't see them. And he treats it just like that. Hold her tight, keep her down. And the reality is he needs to fight side by side, but he can't fight what he can't see because those are her demons. I said it earlier, D made up her mind. I'm gonna fight my demons. Mm-hmm. In mental health, that could be medication. For her, it goes back to baseball. Put on her cap, she laced up those Chuck Taylors, and she made a plan on how to confront her demons. Mm-hmm. Shut all the doors, for one, so that she knows the direction that the demon is going to come in, that the demons are going to come at. Mm-hmm. And like her own prediction, they showed right up. Of course, she drew out what they looked like because she can no longer voice what they look like. She drew them, and someone was adept enough to screenshot that it was a picture of the brown-skinned demon who was looking through the woody windows, not the windows of the garage. But confronting your demons and getting everybody else to see your demons and believe in your demons. That's more work than anybody could ever be challenged with, you know? Trying to explain to people that Somebody's after me. How often have you heard that? Someone's after me. Someone's in my room. Someone's been in my car. And we all say, oh, you need a little help, right? And of course, Black people have had the tendency to stay away from therapy. I don't know what was going on in the 50s. I think by that time they were doing, what do you call those brain?
Electrodes,
Exactly.
shock therapy and stuff.
Shock therapy, electrodes, all of that. So I could see them carting her off in that way. And then she becomes exposed even more to these demons. As you can see, she gets ripped in the arm by that one. So if we leave her in a hospital, I don't know which way it's going to go, but I can see her ending up in a bed and them holding her down, not confronting, helping her to really confront these real life demons, especially magical people. Montrose has said, and they got magic. How do I explain that? Mm-hmm. He needs to turn that switch on and realize she can see the magic too as well. So I think it's just mental health is something that we are not necessarily good at. We're getting better at it, but we're not good at it. Certainly not in 1955.
And it seems like Montrose is like extra sensitive about mental health as it relates to Dee. Like he does, and that's why I agree. I don't think she was completely neglected. I think everybody tried the best they could while also dealing with their own crises going on in the episode. But Montrose, remember he tells Tick the story about the gay pastor who's caught in the park and then was institutionalized. Yeah. So I think he's scared for himself. He's scared for Dee. Like, just fight them. Don't let them get you, because what happens if they get you? You get locked up in the asylum or something extra. Like, so I think there's maybe not even wanting to fully acknowledge that she might be seeing some stuff, just whatever it is, you put up a fight, but I think he did try to support her the best way he could. I think they all split up to look for her, but ultimately got distracted by, again, their own crises. And I think that's almost like the nature of Black parenting sometimes, under the duress of racial injustice and terror in America. Like, we have to be parents the way everybody else is parents, but we also have to deal with the threat to our lives and livelihood day in and day out as well, our safety and the safety of our children. And so sometimes even when we're thinking about protecting them, like, we got to think about protecting ourselves and all these other things. And so balancing all of that has been difficult for many of us. And it's difficult for the characters in this show. So I think that we have to kind of acknowledge the humanity of everybody involved. But like you said, Pamela, Dee puts on her armor. She's a warrior woman, just like Hippolyta, somewhere in some other dimension, fighting battles with her helmet and she gets the pipe, that's her sword. She puts her chucks on. She's ready. And so the point you were making about baseball, I don't know if this is an okay time to bring it up, but I thought, I noticed she had the Negro Leagues. You noticed her cap. You raised the question, Pamela, if it was Negro Leagues, and then we found out it was the Chicago-American Giants, and which was just one of the most dominant team for many, many years in the Negro Leagues. And this is actually like its last stand. Like 1955 is like the last heyday, the last great baseball season of the Chicago American Giants. But she puts that on. And so again, the Black folks juju, like she's invoking the magic and the strength of maybe even that team, also getting out of the kind of frilly feminine of her dress to try to feel maybe more empowered. Not to say that there's not power in femininity, but maybe there isn't power in a certain version of it, right? And that was what Hippolyta was bringing to the fore. If you can only see femininity as this fragile, weak, shrinking thing, then you've misunderstood femininity, and femininity is fierce. And so I feel like Dee is mirroring her mother, even at this, and invoking maybe her mother. She says, her name is Hippolyta, it's Greek, you know what I mean? So she's calling her mother's strength to her. Even instead of going into Letty's safe house, which we know is protected, she goes to Woody. Like, that's her mother. She's still seeking out her mother in all of this to help her through this battle, because she doesn't feel seen or heard, and literally is not heard by all the other adults that are there to protect her. So yeah, she's on the move. She's constantly moving, trying to find a safe place to feel her feelings and do her battle.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I also think the adults know how adult she is, meaning they know she's autonomous and she walks this neighborhood at will, whenever. And they were like, did you check here? Did you check that? They knew all of her haunts. They knew that Dee can make it around without any help. You know, I think Ruby as the babysitter is just, you know, I'm here to hang out more so than be your babysitter. You know, some children you don't have to manage. Sometimes they manage you. Because if you listen to the conversation that Letty had with the kids at the game, at the coffee table, she's like, she cursed around them like, I could beat you. You know, it was very much, you know what, they're almost peers on some level, which was part of the reason why they were just like, yeah, we'll find her, you know?
Yeah, they trust her. And she's usually, and this is why the thing is inverted and things are just off kilter, because Dee, being the responsible young woman that she is, she makes some real serious missteps. One, not going into Letty's house, but even before that, going into the alley when the police are following her. Yeah. What Black girl in 1955 with the police behind you walks into the alley instead of out in the street in the sun where there are other people who can see what's going down? Like, Dee is off, right? But she's grieving. She's kind of almost just like aimlessly marching through the street, thinking about her friend and looking at the, you know, we're closed for Emmett signs, I guess. So she's not even herself in this moment. So she's not even doing the things and using the mechanisms, you know, the training and the smarts that keep her safe otherwise. But the adults aren't aware of that. They're not even thinking, this is Dee grieving. Maybe she's not gonna be the responsible teenager we know her to be because something's different. She's going through trauma without her mama. Like that's unusual, right? So, and a motherless child is just uniquely vulnerable in this world. And so she doesn't have access to all her tools until at the very end, they start coming back to her and she's drawing and she's kind of getting her tools together. But yeah, everybody's struggling with being off kilter and out of sorts this episode.
So let's throw our theories out. And it is killing me because just before this, when we were just kind of having our round table talk, Justin threw out a theory and I cannot remember it for my whole life. But it was so good. Does anybody remember what this theory was?
Yeah.
Was it about Christina?
I can't even remember if it was about who. Was it the idea that Dee is the robot arm person?
Yes.
Was that what it was?
That was my idea. And I think that came, and that wasn't really mine. That was someone mentioned that in the Facebook group. That
a few people said that.
Yeah. That Dee might be this woman in the future with the hood and the robotic arm that Tick saw when he went through the
portal.
Right, since her arm is injured by the twins.
I don't know if that was it. It was another one. It was another theory. And I can't remember what it had.
About Christina being a conjuration of her dad.
Oh, yeah.
There it is. That.
Yeah, like a magical test tube baby. Like he just created her.
That was it.
Yeah.
Yes.
She has all these new experiences. Why hasn't she experienced these things? We know, being the child of basically a sorcerer, she would be, you know, sheltered and so forth and wouldn't experience certain things, but it's just too many inconsistencies. Why has she not experienced jump rope and all these other different things that are just normal? So how long has she been here?
The only thing that I couldn't get around is if he did have, you know, the opportunity to conjure or create, you know, a life, why wouldn't he create his own heir? You know? Unless
why would he make a boy?
Right, unless somehow he used Christina's mother as an energy, as a body, and was like, okay, this will work. I can conjure an heir. But because of her female energy, you know, came out with a baby girl. Because we know in the mausoleum, her mom passed at least like 22 years before here. It's possible, you know, that Christina is 22 years old and died somehow. But I was mulling that around too.
Maybe he got the spell wrong. He definitely did that. We definitely saw him get the spell wrong with Tick. So maybe he wanted a son and accidentally created a daughter.
And his wife's blood was not, like, she wasn't of the bloodline. So maybe that's how he knew that he needed to locate a descendant, a male descendant.
Okay.
Which is really twisted, but I mean, it's just a theory. I feel like nothing's off the table here. Right.
Is it worth visiting? Because we're wrapping up. Is it worth visiting this love triangle? Not even a triangle. Whatever was going on with Gia showing up, Letty's pregnant, Tick knew it, she didn't know, he knew. Letty goes off on Tick because Letty has been taking it. She's just been taking it for episode after episode, and she finally had enough. Had enough. She heard about the whole backstory from some other woman from another country that just showed up and is sitting at her pregnant table talking about sex with her man. The Maury, I felt like I was on Geraldo. Like I did not see that level of drama coming. I could not have seen it. And neither did Tick. You know, and Tick had just had enough. And I was blown away by the response that this got, because there were so many people that were like, Tick shouldn't have thrown that. I'm gonna call it a haiku because it was. I don't care if the syllables were off. He threw that. What we had wasn't nothing. I'm not dying. Get out. Like that whole moment. And they thought that he was disrespectful to Gia. Gia didn't deserve that, even though she showed up not given any info. And was like, can we just visit this just for a minute? I think that we cannot close this podcast until we address this, because this was just, aside from Christina and Ruby, this was another really intense scene.
Well, you know what? Someone in the group actually brought this up, and it was like 400 comments of people coming for his neck. I wish I could find his name, but he was like, well, it was after after Gia's episode. He's like, well, if Tick knew something supernatural, why hasn't this come up? Like, why didn't he tell Uncle George? Why didn't he tell Letty? Because they're dealing with all of these supernatural things, you know, now. So when the shoggoths pulled up in episode 2, or was episode 1? When they pulled up, it was like, you know, Tick kind of just, you know, obviously he was frightened, but he kind of handled things. He was like, okay, look, here's what we do. Somebody needs to get the car. It was just like, okay, but there's like literal monsters outside and one turning into one in this cabin. So it was, that question was posed like, well, why wasn't something said? And so when that came up in this episode and Letty was like, you didn't tell me that you have some type of history with the supernatural, or, you know, it was just, and I thought exactly what Tick said. I didn't even know what I saw.
Right.
Like the eyes, he saw some tails, his eyes were suctioned. Next thing you know, he's thrown across the room, has a concussion, and when he gets up, she's normal again. So it's like, stay away from, like, I get his reaction in that instance, and it's like, how do you even begin to explain something like this? He can't necessarily tell Uncle George, because as soon as they find out about the shoggoths, they're walking into the mansion, and there's not a free moment to be like, y'all, let me sit you down and talk to you about what happened in Korea. You know, like, we're dealing with all this, but story time real quick. Like, I'd be like, sir, we don't need to talk. Like, what, you know? So it's not really a moment where it's like, it probably didn't even click to Tick that it was something that related to what we're doing here in Chicago. Like, he was probably thinking, okay, Korea got some weird stuff going on, so let me just go back to the States and everything's cool, until of course they run into all this stuff. So I get both sides. Letty's like, look, we've been dodging death for 8 episodes. And so I need you to bring everything forth from your knowledge that you know, especially if it involves, you know, the father of my unborn child losing his life. Mm-hmm. So I completely get it. Her anger was not out of nowhere. And I got to hear it from the ex.
It was that part. I think it was that part for me, because we have seen Letty handle ghosts. She has handled monsters with multiple eyeballs. She's seen it all. But I feel like what we're not going to deal with is hearing about it from an ex. Like, I think that is where I draw the line. If she has some tales, you need to come to me and talk to me about your ex that had a bunch of tales that threw you across a room, because we can't move forward in honesty and in trust without some pivotal information like that. And now she's sitting in my house.
Well, he was trying to assess it himself. He's trying to figure out what he was seeing and what happened, because when it happened, he was like, what just happened? Get away from me. And he ran from it. But he kept calling her to try to unpack it himself.
Right. And I'm thinking, if he doesn't even unpack all of the atrocities he's seen in Korea, what makes you think he's going to sit down and talk to somebody about something that they would call you crazy for? Like, this is very much that time that Montrose was saying you could get institutionalized for something as being gay. So if you say, I just saw some 9 tails, they would throw you under the institution.
Right.
You'd be like, no.
Yeah.
So I completely get why you didn't say anything.
Isn't it another case of not confronting your demons? You let your demons sit. They're still gonna be there. They're gonna show up. They're gonna show up and show out.
In the pregnant sitting room.
Well, they come in your girl's mansion and sit down at her dinner table and say, let me tell you something. If he had confronted, now I'm actually with you, China, on, he probably could never express this, but I'm trying to tie in what happens if you let your demons sit. You know, that elephant in the room in Korea, wherever it is, it will show up and show the out.
You know what? It seems like all the characters are like that. Like, they each have their own private experience with magic, and they're not communicating with each other about magic. It has to like come out in these like dramatic moments where they're like, oh, and I knew about magic too. You knew about magic? I knew about magic. You know what I mean? Like, they're all, you know what I mean, in these silos of individual experience with magic. The only person who has actually tried to communicate is the one who can't communicate, which is Dee, about magic. She's ready to tell Letty, look, Letty, she's right in front of you. You know what I mean? But the rest of them are like withholding and protecting. I'm putting that in quotes.
World.
Right. So it's a problem.
Children have no guile. They haven't been destroyed by being put down, not unless you had, one of those suppressed childhoods like Montrose, but children have no guile. They're just gonna be like, here it is. Yeah, I saw this crazy thing. And that's what Diana wants to say. She's ready to let it out. And they knew magically you're gonna have to shut her throat down,
Because she's a kid, she'll talk, they're unfiltered.
That's why they knew they had to silence her. Yes, a free Black child. Like, you know what I mean? Free as possible. Like, I think that's so important that, our children are sometimes better communicators than we are, more honest and authentic communicators than we are, out of the mouth of babes, right? And I think that's so important to not stifle that, but we do sometimes as parents. We don't give our children the space and the freedom and the trust that we will believe them when they speak. So not just trust and believe Black women, but trust and believe Black children. Right? Because abuse gets covered up when we don't listen to our children and validate what they're telling us. And they believe, you know what I mean? And that innocence must be protected as well. So like, there's all kinds of messaging around that here.
Yeah, Ruby and Letty have given the same speech. Tell me every fucking thing. They have, and it's just like, why do people feel they need to lie to them? because you can't be truthful because you'll be exposed probably, you know, and exposure is probably the worst thing I think that adults fear. They're not operating out of love, they're operating out of fear. And so they get to the boiling point of, yo, tell me every fucking, now we hear this every episode because there's one more lie and another lie and Tick has the nerve to tell Montrose, what else do you have that you, wait, bruh. Wait, you're doing the same thing. Hold on. I was raised by you. We do the exact same things we are taught. And I don't think Diana was taught to withhold and it's not in her spirit, I don't think, to hold back. More importantly, it's not in her spirit.
So one more little controversial point that came up was the idea of, since we're talking about lies, the lies we tell ourselves. So there were some that did not like Christina for correcting Ruby on what she meant. And then there were some that believed that Ruby wasn't being truthful because on a day such as this, she was a woman that wanted what she wanted. What do we think about that idea? And was this a lie Ruby was telling herself to maintain some sense of control in a really ridiculous and uncontrollable kind of situation? Or was Christina imparting some truth about, I did not force your hand. You came here, you knew what this was about, you know what I mean? There's no more mystery in this. And what do we think about that?
The fact that she was with William on that day shows that her intentions are different than what she keeps on saying. Like when she spoke about Emmett. So she basically put a mirror in front of her face. You're not really what you say you are. And the only way to quell the feeling that she had was to take that potion and turn into Hillary.
To absolve,
so she felt a little better about it.
Yeah.
Black women
That's
are
just a
tethered.
mask.
I was gonna say Black women are tethered to Black men and the Black community. And I think they hold tighter to it than anybody else in the Black community. I think Ruby knows the speech of, I'm supposed to be on the other side of town because that's what I've been taught. That's what I've been taught how to feel about my own community. I should be over there. But boy, oh boy, being over here in this mansion where I don't have to have the pretense of crying and caring and all of that stuff. It sure is nice to be up here in this AC.
Right, because the power was out in Black Chicago.
White woman, what it is. I'm sorry.
I think, the icons say the truth is a tree with many branches. And I think both can be true at the same time. I think when she was there in the moment and when she was talking with Letty, talking about the photos, I think she truly did care about Emmett Till. And I think she's also a woman who wants what she wants, you know what I mean? And I think both are true, which is why she's telling Letty, it's okay to protect yourself. It's okay to protect your mental health and your emotions and not go there just because everybody expected you, the photographer, to take these pictures, right? She's like, there are expectations of you to care. And like you said, Pamela, such an important point, to be involved and engage in a certain way as a Black woman. But also sometimes we got to protect ourselves from the constant trauma and the constant barrage. Sometimes we can't be on the front lines.
Right.
Sometimes we got to take a break and lay our burdens down, put our weapons down, put that down and allow someone else to take their turn. And I think, I don't know if it's exactly what Christina said it was, a complete not caring, but definitely a need for a relief of a break from it, an escape from it, even if it's temporary.
You know what?
Ruby, was doing both.
Christina can say that because she's never been in a Black body.
Right, exactly.
She can separate the two and have the nerve to say, you wanted what you wanted, Right. She can have that separate conversation and throw it on her. But I think you're absolutely right. They're not mutually exclusive. And all of those things can be a part of your truth. So.
Final theories.
The only last point I had was the shooting up of Letty's house, kind of bringing to mind the shooting up of Fred Hampton's house. Fred Hampton being the very young Black Panther Party for Self-Defense organizer, also from Chicago, also shot up in his home in Chicago with his pregnant fiance in the room with him. So, so thinking about like pregnant Letty and then Tick showing up and the police just like blowing the whole house full of like countless holes. Just, you know, that I thought that that was really important. And only 2 of the cops know about magic. So do these other police even know why they're shooting up this house just because they heard Nation of Islam radicals were in there? And so they're just gonna just indiscriminately shoot the whole house, right? Like just the mindless violence that goes along with kind of policing then and now, where there's just a instantaneous lethal reaction to a Black person, a Black body, a Black space. Shoot first, ask no questions ever. Like, I think that's really important. Like, this is a point I think even Micah made, which is the white cop, Lancaster, doesn't even know what he's sent after D. There's this ignorance, this blindness. He's still perpetrating violence and shooting, you know, curses out at this Black girl, wrapping her up in all kinds of evil. He doesn't even know what it looks like. And that's the nature of white privilege, like the privilege of being oblivious to the specific ways your whiteness does harm to Black people. You don't even know. You just live in white and doing what you think you need to do for yourself, right? To meet your ends and to serve your interests. But like, white people have the privilege of not being fully aware of what racism does to other people. And I think that that ignorance is bliss idea is so true in this last scene, with the shooting up of the house, but even before that, when we're encountering Dee, she's so much more intelligent and knowledgeable than the cops. She knows her mother's name is Greek. They don't know Greek mythology when it's staring them in the face, like they think it's an African name. Like because we have to be knowledgeable about them. We have to know ourselves and them to survive, right? And they don't have the burden of having to have all of the knowledge of all of the people, right? They can be ignorant of even their own stuff and still be more powerful in some ways. So those were my last thoughts.
They can even get away with crimes by claiming that they didn't know any better. Like that young boy, was that affluenza or whatever they were calling it? He didn't know any better, so they let him off. Yet if it was one of us, put him under the jail.
Yeah. Only under whiteness is ignorance, innocence.
Yeah, I think the 2 cops who are actually bumbling idiots, as far as I'm concerned, it just points to white mediocrity and how white mediocrity and power hook up and link up and never separate. And I don't care how powerful this young lady is and how bright and brilliant she is, she has no power in terms of their world. She's powerful to us, you know? And I just think that showing that the fact that these mediocre guys who don't know the name Hippolyta is Greek, you know, that's your history, bruh. You know, if she had lived now, she probably would have said, bruh, that's your people, you know? And so I'm like, how do you explain the beautifulness of something so great standing in front of them, and they just become these depraved people and treat this beautiful gift that we see as just garbage, you know, and attach something of death and decomposition to her. This is crazy. But I'm going on. Go ahead.
That's because our lives aren't valued.
Exactly.
But we do matter.
There you have it. Episode 8. We've seen it. We have chewed it. We have delivered it. Oh, I didn't even watch the preview for episode 9. I'm not even gonna lie. The minute Cinnamon came on, I just shut my whole electricity off and had to lay in the dark. I just think
the whole electricity.
Blackout.
Blacked myself out because
solidarity.
Yes.
Blackout.
I just had to black out because I could not process this. Anyway, let us know what you think in the comments. Please add to this discussion. Throw us your theories. Like, comment, subscribe, share. We have 2 episodes left. Here we go. Good night.
Good night.